So, once again, I've been sitting outside reading. I'm almost done with Sapiens here. And I figured I'd do another subsection. Now, I'm not doing every topic he covers in the book as a subsection, just the ones that really hit me and forced me to think. And this one was interesting because my initial reaction, like often is the case with the things that he speaks to, was that this didn't really cover what I wanted it to do. And let me see if I can find it. It's basically a section on happiness. It's called "And They Lived Happily Ever After." And immediately making judgments, about the relative happiness levels and how we would measure them across different generations, well, across different eras, epochs, whatever you want to say. And that, look, in a lot of ways you can look at hunter-gatherers, and until the industrial age at the very least, the agricultural revolution seems to have set back a great deal of factors. Health, for example, was reduced. Our dietary consumption was made less interesting, and in some ways less suited to our physiology as we began eating more and more grains and whatnot. That our individual, capacity to act, etc., became more and more constrained by the society around us, that our propensity for violence increased, and therefore a certain kind of misery. On the other hand, of course, we traded that off for being able to follow the dictates of our biological imperative to, spawn more and create more and more humans. And, however you want to take that, that it seems like we traded away some level of happiness, whatever that may mean, at least looked at from some sort of objective standards, for a certain level of, increased quantity, a larger genetic pool, etc., but also our own genes being more likely to survive across the eras and whatnot. And then he goes to counting happiness, which is how you would end up determining what makes you happy, right? Now, immediately at this point, I started having concerns of, is happiness really the right measure as to why we're here, right? And when I hit something like that, I immediately want to argue, and I wanted to take the book, and start complaining right away, because what he's doing is going into different mechanisms by which we might measure happiness. Things like, material wealth or health or something along those lines. And what he finds is that when you start asking people subjectively how happy are they, it kind of doesn't actually matter, right? Like, and this fits so well with my own existence. So, for example, I think that I would be probably happiest in some kind of situation like a gulag. My reading of things like A Day in the Life convinced me that, if that's the book I recall, it's the Solzhenitsyn, convinced me that, hey, those minor pleasures like mean more than the material comfort that I have. I would never trade one for the other, right? Because my natural inclination is towards indolence and comfort, being a Taurian, but, and also human, when I look at the pleasures that are enjoyed of, scooping the last bit of gruel up and that tiny bit of taste or whatever, I understand them very much. And on the other hand, I don't understand when I look at other people who seem to have a generally relatively happy life, and, may have more troubles than I do, may have less. It doesn't really make a difference. They just seem to fit in and deal with the society and all that kind of stuff and be happier. So that's one side of it, is that if you're measuring, by how happy people are as to their circumstances, it doesn't really equate to matching to their circumstances exactly. Now, he doesn't look at what I see, which is that I would actually probably be happier and have been happier throughout my life under more miserable circumstances. For example, let's take a look at my power outage. I was frantic about it. I hated aspects of it. I went to sleep cursing, the night and the fact that I couldn't, play Raid that I felt like I needed to do, and I couldn't do, I was spending long nights just like fiddling with the fire because it's the only thing that I could fucking do throughout that time, like, and maybe light a candle and read a little bit or whatever, but everything was difficult, and in a way everything had to be earned. Every little moment of pleasure had to be earned more. Whereas, now I numb myself in front of the computer, most of the time. And even when I do something, what little I do that I might feel some accomplishment about, it's minor comparatively. It's minor. And there I had the constant hope each day that the power would come back on, right? Well, now I have nothing to hope for, right? So that may be another difference, is that in those most miserable circumstances, I always have hope that it can get better. But when I'm in non-miserable circumstances, I see the reality that my life is likely to just keep declining, as it has been for the past, decades. But anyhow, then when we get to the next section, chemical happiness, which looks at how biologists look at what actually reflects happiness in a given human, he takes that, and this is actually, absolutely in alignment with, my arguments. That a biologist will look will look at, the chemical effects inside you, the various, not necessarily drugs, but natural equivalents to drugs that are being fired off, etc., and that's what makes us happy. And that the body biologically actually just sort of settles you into a certain place of happiness, a certain level of, yeah, this is how your body just operates. And look, if something wonderful happens, yes, you feel as happy as you can get when that happens. And they actually look at their biological differences, and some people tend to be overall mostly happy, and kind of no matter what happens to them, no matter how bad it is, there's a certain level of acceptance and being okay with that. And some of us are just biologically miserable, and no matter how good it gets, we can only rise to a certain level, which may be better than the worst that someone else is at, but is not, not equivalent to, say, maybe where they are on just a good day, right? Our maximum might not be anywhere near their maximum. And, the argument there is, well, if happiness is the goal, just fucking drug yourself up with this shit. And he brings the point that, that's essentially the Brave New World, and we all recoil from that. And what's up with that? And this is a really, really subtle, given how broadly and coarsely he kind of covers these issues. He's looking at, I think, most, if not all, of the aspects here, and that's what I like. Most of the topics that he covers in the book, he does this. He gives you a slice of one thing, a slice of another. The thing that hit me the worst with the religions and ideologies was he left a big one out, one that I feel he's blinded to, and many of us are. Because it is our culture and it is so much of our basis, which is the underlying principles of scientism and whatnot. The idea that knowledge is good, etc. That you want to seek more understanding of the universe, etc. That is our fundamental morality, I would say, in a lot of ways. Along with maybe the humanist trends or whatever that were also baked into us, which he also seems to buy into. Despite the fact that, like, a humanist gave one of the harshest criticisms of his book, and I was a little rough with him, but, whatever. He tried to defend science at the same time. But yeah, the idea that, like, look, you want to be happy? Give yourself some serotonin boosts regularly, whatever. These things will just, and whatever effect they have on your life, who cares? That comes down to, what the hell, man? How is this different from the heroin addict? And he actually points out one of these, which is that, look, if biological studies were limited to just like heroin users, what they would find is what makes you happy? Shooting up. What makes you miserable? Not being able to shoot up, right? So, like, the things that are going to make us happy, that may not be the best goal. And this is really a point. A friend of mine posted on Facebook something about, if you want to be happy, all you have to do is decide to be. And honestly, that's the truth, I think. I really do. It's always been that dichotomy I had between, look, there's two things you can do when you're faced with reality that you don't like. You can change the reality. You can change the world. You can go out and try to make things better for yourself. Or you can change how you look at things. And I'm not sure about the value of either of them, to be honest, right? We'll get to that in a moment. Certainly, though, that second one, change how you look at things so that you are okay with the misery that you're suffering. And well, in a way, that's the look. I think I would be happier in a gulag than I am in the life that I lead. In terms of, I would have more moments of joy and pleasure rather than sort of this depressing numbness and sadness and whatever that has pervaded most of my life. It's really at moments when things are at their worst that I kind of feel my best, which is somewhat depressing in and of itself. But yeah, he points out that, like, you take a look at the Brave New World concept, and to many of us, that seems more monstrous than even like 1984, right? And because it's like everybody's happy, but man, they're just on drugs. His argument against this, or to the next side of things, is that there might be some sort of meaning to existence, right? And for the religious person, that exists, but most of us don't buy into our religious faith to that degree, I would say. Certainly I'm incapable of it, right? But then his argument against that is, look, what you're doing is you're making yourself happy, and this doesn't have to be religion, okay? This can be any purpose that you have. Let's say you buy into scientism 100% and you believe that expanding human knowledge is a great thing, in the same sort of way that, like, devoting yourself to God is a great thing. Well, they each seem equally futile when looked at, under the cold light of the reality that scientism does expose, which is, we are so insignificant in general that the idea that, like, what we could discover and figure out and understand in whatever our short species lifespan might be, and certainly in our individual lives, is so minuscule that it really has no impact whatsoever on the broader context of things. And certainly, unless you find some great scientific discovery or whatever, you're probably not going to be doing much that helps along these lines anyway, right? And so this idea of a purpose to any individual's life feels like nothing more than a delusion. But he takes that further, that any kind of purpose to humanity feels like it's a delusion. And I agree and align completely with this, but I'm still not sure that I entirely buy it. I don't know how to make this argument, though, so I will try to fuzz around and think about it. But it does have something to do with a combination. It has to do with my own fairy tales when it comes down to it. My animism and whatnot, it has to do with kind of an aligning of spirits with, my own spirit with the spirit around me. And that would actually be the appropriate way to deal with things, but that's something different. And that's something that is kind of alien and is not covered in here. But basically, what he comes down to is, look, what do we have as choices? We can chase the things that momentarily make us happy, that are maybe productive or whatever. An even more efficient way is we can just drug ourselves into happiness. Or we can create fictions or believe in fictions, maybe especially ones that align well with our society, and let them make us happy in some sort of way. And then he goes into I would argue a line of thinking that aligns well, for him at least, with Buddhism. And not the liberal West's version of Buddhism, which is based on something very much like what the biologists are talking about that would lead to drugs, rather just, to my, more in alignment with my, well, you've got two choices, change the world or change yourself, which is, just sit there and take happiness in everything. Tune out, man. Chill, enjoy. And there's really no more value to that than there is in shooting up, right? Whatever makes you happy. And this is where I have trouble coping with it, which is that with the Buddhism that he expresses, it's to push aside both the positive and the negative. And my understanding of it is to kind of become a nothingness. That doesn't sound particularly better to me either. It really doesn't. He titles it Know Thyself. And I feel like I'm probably missing the point here. But here, the problem according to Buddhism is that our findings are no more than fleeting vibrations changing every moment, like the ocean waves. You either have to constantly chase the pleasant feelings and drive away unpleasant feelings. Even if you succeed, you have to start over again. There's no point to aiming for something so ephemeral, and that you're liberated from suffering when you understand the impermanent nature of all your feelings and stop craving them. I'm not really sure it's a difference. Like, instead of seeking the serotonin high or whatever, you're seeking a deadening. Well, isn't that what the heroin addict is doing as well? And how does that help? So my argument is more towards the fictions of what can we accomplish as this minuscule part of the universe. And that's kind of the problem here, is that, look, he's going to dismiss whatever I come up with as a fiction of my own. And I do have that fiction, right? I have that fiction of the one. But we can look at the biological imperative. We can look at what nature essentially forces us to be and do. Happiness in and of itself is unimportant, right? Is what's important the goal, the future of humanity, etc.? Well, if there is any value to the future of humanity, obviously extending it and refining it is to the best, right? If the overall cosmos, etc., has any value for us, it would be to either become or create things that persist and that explore further and that exceed us, right? Now, here's where we come to the AIs, the fun of the AIs, because the biological processes are unlikely to be rapid enough to perhaps, they're unable to change rapidly enough to react quickly to all changing events. If you look at most biological, the vast majority of life has gone extinct. And, that's not humans' fault. It's just a matter of the recombinations and the luck in the genetic algorithm that's operating on the earth. Is finding what works and then throwing new problems and finding what works with that. But it's kind of this, mishmash. It's never finding something that's optimal against all situations, unless maybe it's tardigrades. But it ain't us. But what we have an opportunity with a mechanical life form, an AI, is something that is not limited by biological lifespans, but is capable of evolving on its own. See, this is the thing. Our evolution, our changes in our basic hardwiring require us to go through generations. To go through recombinations of the DNA, etc. That's not so necessary when you start looking at machine intelligence. With machine intelligence, if it can reprogram itself, you're looking at something that may extend some of our ideals, some of our concepts, etc., into a much broader and longer lasting existence. And hey, if we get to ride along as pets, that's cool. Anyway, that's kind of my just linking, a not so distant rant with this material. But yeah, I did find his discussion overall on the concept of happiness to be particularly interesting, because it's always been one of the problems as you look at that early hunter-gatherer experience, and then it's like, but then humanity suffered this huge decline in lifespan, in what we would rate as standard of living now, freedom. We'd have to work many more hours to get agriculture to work. But what was the payoff for it? The payoff is we create more biological copies of ourselves, right? More replicas. Well, if that's... I gotta swap batteries. Yeah, we'll not bother. If that's all we're doing, if that's because we're programmed to keep spawning and whatnot, well, we've done a pretty good job, but now the goal is obviously we've got to get all our eggs out of one basket, get off the earth. Probably a good idea to try to keep the earth somewhat habitable long enough that we can do that. And none of these things seem very likely without some very fundamental changes, either in human nature or in our overarching society that we'd have over us. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm like, I don't see an easy answer with just humans doing it. I think we need help, and I think we're on the verge of being able to create help. Anyway, not quite where I wanted to go. I wanted to go more into my spiritual argument for why this is a good thing, but I'm running out of time, and it's not well enough formulated. It's not there for me enough, but it has something to do with, like, consider the reality all around us, and we're a part of that. And do we want to become a bigger part of it? Do we want to become a more do we want to have more influence over that overarching spirit? And if not, well, if we're not going to become a more important part, why bother being? So why not? Why not try to seize control of more of the one, and help direct it, and understand it better so we can direct it better. Anyway, sort of a weird animistic spiritual scientism. Technologism, even. Okay, I'm gonna send this one off. But again, for the most part, the things he discusses, I find, yes, he takes very broad strokes. It's very abstract in a lot of ways. He avoids hitting maybe all the points that need to be hit. But it engages, and each time I come up here to talk about a slice of it, it's because this book has managed to pull me into the argument.